Today I'm going to be performing a speech from Shakespeare's As You Like It in the original Early Modern English, or EME pronunciation. This speech comes from Act 2, Scene 7, and is performed by the character Jacques. All you need to know about the speech is that Jacques just met a fool, or a jester, in the woods, and he's coming to tell his friends a dirty joke that the jester told him. Now this joke doesn't translate to present-day English, or PDE, because it's based on a couple puns that no longer work and a couple words that have lost meanings. So without further ado, here's the speech. A fool. A fool. I met a fool in the forest. A motley fool. Miserable world. As I do live by food, I met a fool who laid him down, bashed him in the sun, and railed on Lady Fortin in good terms. In good set terms, and yet a motley fool. Gamora fool, Cathay. No, sir, Cathay. Coming out full till having I sent me Fortin. And then he drew a dial from his poke, and looking on it with lackluster eye, says very wisely, it is 10 o'clock. Thus we may say, Cathay, all the world wags. 'Tis but an hour ago since it was 9, and after an hour more, 'twill be 11. And so from hour to hour we ripe and ripe, and then from hour to hour we rut and rut, and thereby hangs a tale. When I did hear the motley fool thus moral on the time, me lungs began to crow like Chanticleer. That fool should be so deep contemplative. And I did laugh. Sans intermission, and an or by his dial. A noble fool. A worthy fool. Motley's the only wear. Now I am going to be going over the major syntactic, phonological, and semantic changes that are apparent in the speech, before repeating the speech a second time, so that hopefully it can be understood as it was meant to be when it was first written and performed. I'm also going to explain the joke itself. So first, the syntax. We have pretty frequent use of the emphatic do in this speech in phrases such as I did hear or I do live. We still have this in modern English, however its usage is much more limited. It's mostly now used in rebuking a claim. So if someone were to say to you, oh, you don't run, you could respond with, well, I do run. Next we have a couple verbs that used to be reflexive but no longer are in English. These verbs are actually still reflexive in other Germanic languages such as Norwegian or German. So what happened was the suffix self was added on to the reflexive pronoun. So when he says he laid him down and basked him in the sun, what he's really saying is he laid himself down and he basked himself in the sun. Now finally, this is more a point about the morphology, but as you can see, the past tense of quote has a th suffix instead of an ed suffix. So it's quoth instead of quoted. Next we have the phonology. So first, Shakespeare was writing at a time before palatalization had occurred in English. So what this means is that words like intermission were pronounced intermission. Words like fortune were pronounced fartin. Shakespeare was also writing at a time when the orthography better represented the number of syllables that a word was going to have. So a word like miserable in modern English is 3 syllables, but at the time was miserable because it's spelled with 4 syllables. Next we have the pronunciation of R sounds in English. The first person to ever write about the pronunciation of R's in English was Ben Jonson. He was a contemporary of Shakespeare's, and he said that after vowels, they had a dog-like sound. So the early modern English R was actually a lot closer to the American English R than current British English. And the vowel also would drop in quality if it was followed by an R. So world was warled. A quick note about the vowels in general. In general, they were of lower quality in early modern English. And diphthongs started from a central position, a more central position. So something like I would be pronounced I, and something like down would be pronounced down. Finally, we have two smaller points. The first being that the word one at the time was pronounced on. And secondly, in certain set words, an intervocalic V or TH was dropped entirely. So a word like 11 was pronounced alen. Moving on to the semantics. First, we have the word motley, which at the time signified specifically multicolored or multi-fabriced clothing. So when Jacques says he met a motley fool, what he's really saying is he met a jester who was wearing colorful clothing. He was wearing a jester's uniform. Now, Jacques says that the fool railed on Lady Fortune. When he says this, he's saying that the fool badmouthed the concept of fortune. He's speaking bad about the idea of fortune. And he did so in good, set terms. Set, at the time, meant well stated, well put, or appropriate. So Jacques is saying not only did he badmouth fortune, but he did so well. Then the fool pulls a dial out. If you wanted to tell the time, back then, you would need to carry a miniature sundial around with you. Now, some of the more expensive dials would have a compass built into the ring so you could correctly position yourself in relation to the sun, but most would not, so you would have to carry a compass on you as well and try to find the right position to tell the time. Now, he pulls the dial from his poke. Poke is not a pocket, but it is where we get the term pocket from. It was a little satchel that you would clip onto your belt loop, and you would use it as a pocket. It would be just a little bag where you would keep anything you were carrying around on you. The fool says that we can see how the world wags. What he means when he says this is that we can see how the world functions or how the world works. And after the joke is told, Jacques says that his lungs began to crow like Chanticleer. Chanticleer was a character from a popular French children's story series of the time, Renaud the Fox. This was very popular in England at Shakespeare's time, so it would have been a very easily recognizable reference for Shakespeare's audience. And Chanticleer was a rooster, so when Jacques says this, what he means is he heard the joke and he just started belting out laughing. Now finally, we have the word sans, which means without in French. In early modern English in Shakespeare's time, it could be used interchangeably with without in English. They mean the same exact thing. They could be used in the same scenarios. It was just more of a choice thing. Finally, we have the joke itself. This is a pretty dirty joke. It's based on a few puns that no longer work in modern English because the pronunciation has changed. And it's based on a few words that used to have additional meanings they no longer have. So right off, we have the word hour, which in Shakespeare's time was pronounced the exact same way as whore. It was or. In the same line, we have the word ripe, which it still kind of has this meaning, but it was much more common to use the word ripe to refer to coming to sexual maturity or sexual fruition. In the next line, we have the word rot, which was pronounced the same way as the word rut back then. It's pretty easy to guess what Shakespeare meant when he says this. It's still pretty common in Australian English for rut to mean to have sex with. Finally, we have the word tail, which at Shakespeare's time was slang for penis. So now I am going to recite the speech a second time, so hopefully you can understand it as Shakespeare's audience would have. A foal. I met a foal in the forest. A motley foal. Miserable world. As I do live barefoot, I met a foal. Laid him down, bust him in the sun, and railed on Lady Fortune in good terms. In good set terms, and yet a motley foal. Good morrow, fool, quoth they. No, sir, quoth they. Coming out foal to 11 I'll set me Fortune. And then he drew a dial from his poke, and looking on it with lackluster eye, says very wisely, it is 10 o'clock. Thus we may say, quoth they, how the world wags. Oh, he's but an hour ago since it was 9, and after an hour more to be 11. And so from hour to hour, we're ripe, and then from hour to hour, we're rut, and thereby hangs a tale. When I did hear the motley foal thus moral on the time, my lungs began to crow like Chanticleer. That foals should be so deep contemplative. And I did laugh. Sans intermission, an or by his dial. Oh, noble foal, a worthy foal, motley's the only wear.